In this video, I hold nothing back. It's a little bit long, I understand, but I literally go through as much as I physically can with you guys and share you all the secrets that I have learned 20 years of painting walls, whether that be graffiti, commissions, or on canvas. So I really hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind of an artist, and hopefully you learn a couple of things from today's video. Anyway, I'll shut my mouth now and let's just jump straight into the tutorial on how you can paint the Pokemon wall. So to prepare the wall that we are painting today, I am first going to paint the background a light colour. Here I am doing so with spray paint, but I am doing so because there was already lighter tones existing on the background and only wanted to fill in the darker areas. If the wall was going to be completely covered from the very start, I would have used emulsion and a roller and covered the entire wall ready for me to lay over the doodle grid. The reason we want to make sure all the tone is the same is to make it 1,000 times easier to lay the doodle grid upon, which is extra important if you want to do super detailed pieces or really intricate portraits. There really is no point in making it harder on yourself than it has to be, so making sure the wall is ready from the earliest stages takes out so much guesswork for yourself and leaves you with a lot more of a stronger finalized result. A few of you that have asked me about the doodle grid and asking what is it. A doodle grid is basically a placement grid, so now it helps me to guide where the piece is going to sit. Once you've got a picture of the wall, you want to then open up the Photo Layers app. Once you've opened up the app, you want to import the picture of the wall and scale it in. Like so. Now you have the wall up. You want to also import the sketch, the initial sketch you put in for the wall. Once you have both imported, you then want to make sure your sketch is on top and position it accordingly. Then you want to put the opacity down, like so. Play with the contrast if you need to. Make sure the background layer is bright, like so, that helps. Then you layer it over your doodle grid until you are happy with the sizing. The main reason we're doing this is when you come to sketch, you can line it up with the grid. So here for the eye, let's say, you know it starts on this small square and then it moves towards this wiggly shape and ends there. This gives you precise accuracy on where your piece is gonna sit, so when it comes to colouring it in, nothing is out of proportion and it just makes it 1,000 times easier for you, especially when doing portraits. Using the image from Photo Layers, I am using the colour black to sketch up the outline. The reason behind using black, as it is not clashing with the white background we put in at the beginning or the red lines we put in place for the doodle grid, so keeps it a lot more easier for you to read. There's also a lot of black line work in the character we are doing today, so can use the sketch lines in certain places without having to go over it again later on the piece. Notice that the doodle grid is compact where the character is compared to anywhere else on the piece. The reason being here is there's a lot more finer details in the character, so we need to create smaller shapes so the black sketch lines can reach from A to B. Because the letters are so big and so much movement, there's no need to add a doodle grid here, but instead we need to think how the letters will fit in with the character to complement that best. I like to think of a piece when I use a character as a meal. The character is the best bit, so let's say it's a steak and the letters are like vegetables and the background that's like the wine. By themselves, each individual thing is pretty boring, but if you can manage to tie it all together, you end up creating yourself a banging meal. Now, because the rest of the letters are on a darker background, I'm now going to revert the colours. So I picked myself up this light brown colour. The letters themselves are going to be brown, but first I'm going to mist out the darker tones so the lighter browns later on will pop a lot more and have a lot more strength in the piece compared to if I was to paint directly on black. And that goes with anything, especially yellow. If you're painting yellow on a darker surface, to make sure you get its full brightness of capacity, make sure you layer down a white first, then go over with something like a yellow or light red or light pink, and you will see a massive difference in the vibrancy. Here you just want to make sure all your letters are at the right height and not overpowering the character, because like I said before, the character should really be the focal point with the letters as a complementary factor. I can also do a full tutorial on letters and how to draw the characters up if you wish so please just let me know in the comments if that's something you desire. Firstly, I am going to test if the colours match. Because the main character is blue himself, I want to be certain that the brown tones for the underbelly work as a whole. Once I am happy with colours, I now start to cover the base blue into the face, making sure to leave some of the sketch lines still on show. Keep it simple. For the blue parts, I'm only using 4 different tones, and that is a light blue, a light mid blue, mid dark and a dark tone. And to begin with, we start with the light mid-tone and slowly work our ways out to the lighter and darker values. Now for the nose, I'm now moving on to the dark mid-tone and putting that in place. Once I'm happy with the values between the mid-light and mid-dark, I slowly move my way up to the darker tones and lighter tones, making sure everything is moving along the way I want it to look. A cool tip to add to a lot of noses is to add a drop shadow from the nose itself. This adds a whole new dimension and is a great little trick to add towards your character design. And now we are slowly branching into the darker tones of the blues. You want to slowly look for the places you want to set your values and put them in place, starting up the scale slowly one by one. This way you can see the image come together gradually and get a greater sense of where the lighter tones are going to be compared next to the darker tones. A cool trick here you may have noticed is I've completely sprayed the bridge of the nose in a dark tone. The reason I'm doing this is because later on I'm going to slowly layer over lighter tones and create ridges across it. It gives a really cool effect and gives you the complete contrast from light to dark, and it's just a cool way you can add throughout the image to give it a lot more texture. Remember, you can place the values, but you can also start adding textures that really start giving your imagery and your characters a more of a dynamic and aggressive feel. I'd also like to point out, you kind of want to imagine yourself as a microscope zooming in. So at the beginning, the shapes are going to be bigger. So the base tones, that's a heavy amount of blue just covering a big area. As you get further along on your character, you should be looking to start zeroing in on the can. So you are going to start having less movement with the spray paint itself. And before you know it, you should just be chiseling tiny little outbursts of paint just to give smaller highlights. So basically you want to start with the big broad shapes and start zeroing in with the smaller shapes. So big to small, mid-tones to the darker and lighter tones. After I've valued all the lighter and darker tones so things start looking a bit more 3D, I then overlay certain shapes to add texture or give the whole image a kind of stylistic look. Here on this Blastoise, I've added these small little square shapes with a few dots just to give it more of a scaly look, as it's more of a lizard. So first I'm just establishing light and darks, then I'm adding some effects. So here's like the scales, and then I go back with the paint, picking up a few areas of highlight and darker tones. Usually I would have blasted all the blue areas with that blue light to mid-tone first so the whole thing is covered, and then slowly build up the darker areas. But here I decided just to work on sections as I was just feeling relaxed on the wall and I knew exactly where I was going to take it. Now, knowing what you know about the blue tones and picking only 4 different types of blue to make sure the image looks 3-dimensional, the exact same is going for the brown tones. You have a light, mid-light, mid-dark and dark tone, and I'm just going to keep working around and create shapes. Certain lines I want to accentuate around the teeth or add a 3D effect, but it's the same layout as before, and this will be repeated throughout a character. Say if I was doing a jacket, I would pick 4 colours, keep it simple, that harmonises with the rest of the image, and work it back and forth, getting darker in areas and lighter, just to give it a really 3-dimensional shape. And this is what really makes your characters look really stylised. So on this, we are working on the back arm from the head. And because it's in a drop shadow, because the head is creating the shadow, I know that a lot of this tonal is going to be dark. So for here, instead of laying down the second from lightest, like we did with the central face, here I'm going to start using the darker range of the blues we were using at the very start. This will come with a lot more confidence once you know initially what tones you want to jump straight into. But it just saves a lot of time and a lot of paint instead of layering it down with the lighter blues. As I already know, like I said previously, it's going to be in a lot of shadow, which then results in it being a lot darker than the rest of the character. But as we move to the actual hand itself, it's more in the light, same with the face. So I am doing the same rule as we did previously. Second blue from the lightest tone just to cover it up, and then it makes it so much easier for me just to get that darker tone and layer it over once again. And then I get to just lay it lightly and start picking up with the lighter tones to create finer lines and finer details, as you can see here with the scaly skin and the boils I got on the back of the hands. These are just small effects you add as you go, but adding these textures as well as the initial shapes, you avoid the fact of it looking too smooth or too soft. So make sure you do the blends like we said earlier, the bigger blends, and then move into texturizing the image with the smaller little notches of color that makes something look a lot more detailed than it would be without. Here for the greys in the background, I'm working with the mid colours again, not committing to anything too light or too dark. But first I laid over the dark mid grey, using a lighter grey just to pick out these round shapes and add a few lines. The lines are just indicating the shape of the shell. As for the back of the shell and the belly, we're going to be using the colour brown, and we're going to use the same process once again, just keeping 4 colours and working our way up. Don't worry if you are going to lose a lot of your line work here, because sometimes what will happen is you will take out your line work as a mistake and realise it's kind of cool not to have heavy line work in the belly or certain areas. This way, when you do decide to put line work in place, you have a tactical advantage because you can use it to highlight or accentuate things that are in the foreground opposed to things that are in the background. Sometimes, as a trick, you can do things like the face really heavily and sharply lined, and as it goes back into the background, you can almost lose your line work completely, giving a really cool effect where it looks like the image itself is sinking back. And then if you add this with key lines, my god, you end up with something that looks next level. Now when it comes to the thing that he's holding here, the water gun, there was a few issues to think about when dealing with colour. Here it's already blues and browns, so that's 2 colours. If we were to do the water gun in a blue or brown, it would get lost upon the rest of the image due to it being surrounded by those colours. Rarely when you are doing colour work, you want to use 3 colours, mainly that complement each other. If you want to know how to do that, you want to look at a colour wheel, just Google colour wheel. And when you say look at the colour red, look at the colour 100% opposite it. That is the colour that will complement that colour. So here, purple not being too far away from the blue colour itself. We're keeping the harmony in place to, let's say, if we were to do it green or let's say a colour that was too bright, it look out of place. So really think about your colours before you even start the wall. Have a good idea and try and avoid adding too many colours, like just having purple, yellows and orange and blues. If you do this, you're just going to end up with a rainbow effect, and it's not that appealing to the eye compared to if you had a harmony, and that's why they call it colour harmony. You really want to focus on your colours, on the scale of the colours, and work within those limitations. And here's where it's really cool to be a character artist and have fun with the things you are creating. Here I'm just adding a few small fish in the water gun itself, just because it makes it more of an interesting topic to look at. So when you are doing characters, just think of cool ways you can demonstrate it. Because we are doing a Blastoise here, it doesn't mean you have to stick to the original form. You can put that Blastoise in your own reality and change it up. And that's something a lot of people really admire when they see a lot of new, fresh character designs. Also, I'm going to have a few Pokeballs dipping in the water. That way it just solidates the theme of it being Pokemon, and it just gives them something a bit more extra for the viewer to see and make it way more playful. Now we're moving on to the background. The background itself is a great way to communicate where your artwork is taking place or location wise. Especially if you're going to do big productions like this, backgrounds are something that normally get overlooked, but don't be fooled. Backgrounds are like the rope that tie everything together. And if you have a solid rope, you could take a piece that is average if it's a big commission and really give it a lot of energy and something that just stands out, and especially if you get smart and can use it to complement the piece you are currently working on. For this piece today, we are going to go for a fade, an upward fade. The background comes in two parts. The background bottom being more of the water where the Pokeballs exist and the Blastoise has its feet dipped, and the top half being the sky. And for the sky, I'm going to use a fade. In the middle, the river is very dark. The background is very dark. So from there, I'm taking the lightest blue and spraying up and gradually going to create an upwards fade as we reach the top. This gives you the illusion that what you're seeing is a sunrise or a sunset, and there is a slight transition of light, which actually exists in the real world. Using the lightest blue we used from the very bottom to fade upwards, I'm adding small dots into the darker tones, as you can see, to create a starry night. I'm always looking to see if I can fill up any spaces that look kind of empty or I feel need something just to give it some more spice instead of just leaving it blank. So always be wary if something looks a bit empty on your piece. Think of something you may be able to add to make it more exciting. And saying about adding small elements into your art just to make it a little bit more interesting, here we are going to do some small trees almost silhouetted in the background. And I say almost because here's a common mistake a lot of people do. They will grab the black paint themselves and fill it up super thick, whereas here is a better approach if you just lightly spray over, leaving the background to come through. It creates this effect opposed to just having something that's too blocky and just too unrealistic in the background. So like I said before, light sprays, just wisp it back and forth like it was actually a tree itself and it had branches and leaves. It just looks way more professional and just a lot more better than, just solid stamped out silhouettes. And for the bottom, where we're having the lakeside, you could just leave it black. But once again, like the trees, you're going to have the issue of it just looking too boring and too flat for the whole image. And it can really take away from something that looks so amazing and detailed just to have something that is just sat there as a block bit of colour. So here I'm just spraying a darker blue just to give the eye something to look at when it looks into that space. Once I hit it with the darker blue, I will mist over certain areas again with the black, just so it looks more subtle and it's more tied in with the piece instead of standing out too solid. So by just hitting it again with the black, misting it, it just puts that colour over it, keeping the cool harmony, and really don't want anything in the background taking your attention from what I'm trying to achieve, which is the piece itself. Similar to how we painted the character, we want to make this as simple as we can for ourselves without going OTT. So although for it I'm going to be using 4 different shades of brown, like again you might see a pattern happening now, here I'm only going to be using with the second lightest and the third darkest tone, and only going to be putting these in place. And for this effect, I'm going to almost treat it like it was a 3D cylinder shape, almost like a sphere. What I am doing is putting the lighter tone down first and then making it a 3D shape by using a darker one to wisp downwards and across. Doing so, I'm setting myself up so later on down the line I can use darker tones and very light tones, and by doing that it gives it a lot more of a 3-dimensional shape, especially when I start to put the line work in to frame the entire letter. And if you remember in the Blastoise, we put those small rectangle shapes to give it texture. I'm going to actually apply this to the letters. That way I'm almost giving the letters a character stylized themselves. And not only that, it's also tying in with the character. So there's a theme running throughout, giving it a congruent essence. Gone and done the rookie mistake, which I'm sure all of you have done in the past. I was supposed to have a transparent black, but the plan was to hit all these areas with the transparent black just to give it way more depth. It's like a little magic trick I do, but unfortunately I've left it at home today. So what I'm gonna have to do is use a lighter tone here to raise off to give the illusion that this is darker. Like I said there, the plan was to have a transparent black and a transparent white. If you don't know what they are just colours that will go over the piece without blocking it out completely. It's great for highlights, really cool for shadows, and is a must if you're a portrait artist. It really can bring things together in an amazing way. But for these letters right now, I was going to use that over the colours as I'm moving away to the darker and lighter tones. Using it just gives it that bit of flair, that extra bit of depth, and it just makes the whole thing look a lot more translucent and makes it pop. So I would highly recommend you get yourself a transparent black, transparent white, play around with them on your pieces, and even if you have places where they overlap and you want to drop shadow, using that instead of a bold color is a great little trick just to give things a whole new dimension. And it's those little things of adding the dimensions in that really sets your work apart. So make sure you do spend the time just to go over it again instead of rushing the piece. Remember, you have all the time in the world and you really want to leave the wall happy with a piece you are happy to put up and show people. But because I've been doing this for so many years, there's always a fix, there's always a way around. I didn't have the black with me or the white, so I'm using another lighter tone which I use for the Blastoise character to put lighter tones in, and that adds more contrast to the darker tones. Ideally, it's not the end result I was looking for at the beginning, but it was enough contrast to give it enough shape and give the letters more of a solid feel instead of being weak and flimsy with no real impact of 3D shape. Always focus on the first letter because the rest of the letters will then fall into place. With the S, I made sure I put all the 3D in the places I want to keep it, and when it came to the next letters, the first letter acted as a guide so everything had the right angles and hit the right light. Once you are happy with the feel of the lettering and everything is in position, it's now time to grab yourself a dark brown and we're going to start to outline the letters. One of the key tips when it comes to outlining is to start playing with different kinds of line thicknesses. Here at the top of the letter, you will see it's a lot more thicker than it would be when it starts to chisel into the letter. This is because adding different line thicknesses to a piece adds a whole new layer of complexity, especially when you double that down with the transparent colours as well. Your pieces can easily turn from a 7 to a solid 10 just by applying this technique. So on the outside of a letter, rarely look to double line. A double line is when you run two lines next to each other and fill it in, then it gives you a really thick, crisp line. But when you are going to pull a line into the actual brown itself of the piece, make sure you round it off and cut back with another can. To cut back, you want to grab yourself the colour you use for your piece and go back over the dark brown at a very slight angle so it cuts across it, creating super thin lines. When you master this technique, you can apply this into your piece in a number of different ways, even in some effects where you start chiseling your letters in half, adding this jigsaw effect. Now, as I'm moving along the piece, I'm also adding the 3D. For this piece in particular, all the 3D is shooting straight to the right, and that's how it falls. The reason I'm filling it as I go is I get to see the letter balance and weight. Also, it makes it a lot easier for me to put down all the browns once I've finished and concentrate on the other colours I'm going to insert in the 3D, like the blue, which later you'll see. I really like to keep the area where I'm working just super clean and not have too many colours all around the place. A, it saves a lot of time, and B, you're not falling over your cans as you work and creating the piece. Here is a great example of different line thicknesses. Can you see where I have the small line there, and now on the outside I'm thickening it up. You want to treat the layer like it has its own solid shell. So here I'm giving a thicker line all on the outside while still maintaining that thin line that cuts into the piece. Line thicknesses are key. If I can teach you one thing from this whole tutorial, is to work with your line thicknesses. Now it's time to move on to the key line. Before, years ago, I would just put a line around the whole image, which still looks okay and you can still use it at certain parts. But what I've learned to make a key line really pop out is use it very strategically. Here around the front of the Bulbasaur, the Blastoise's face, I'm going to highlight round just only part of it just to accentuate and bring that forward. By doing so, it really pays. It really looks just a lot better than just putting one solid line around the whole thing and then just have it stamped out. So really think where you want to keep the key line. And another trick, if you want to go really advanced, is to sometimes bring your key line into the actual image. So instead of going on the outside, in certain areas, like say around the mouth, you can then bring it through where the hand is, and then it creates a really cool effect, and it just sort of breaks it up. And it just shows high intellect on how the key line, and yeah, it just looks amazing. So really give that a try and see how you deal with that. And for the rest of the letters, I am going to put the blue around, but I'm not just going to hold my finger full down on the spray can to let all the paint come out. I'm just going to let small bits come out and keep it really thin, really neat and tidy. The reason being is I don't want it to be too overpowering. I just want it to frame the piece really nice and add that extra bit of flavour. Plus it just looks way better in my opinion. Now before you finish the piece, make sure you take a step back, have a look at it and make sure everything is done to the point where you are happy with it, where you are happy to walk away from it. Remember, this is a cool time now to relax with the piece, use every colour you can just to touch up certain areas and just tie the whole thing together. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial because my god did it take some time to make. I just want to jam pack it full of how I actually think and approach a wall, as well as give you all the tips and tricks I've learned for the many years of painting piece after piece, characters and portraits. So yeah, without further ado guys, thanks for staying along. If you made it this long too, I mean damn, you got some work ethic, because to sit for a long video to learn, respect to you. But anyway, we wrap it up and this was the final result of what you get. We didn't have to be.